Yeah.
And so ultimately that fear of regret, or that potential fear of regret, outweighed the fear of not having a paycheck every 2 weeks. And I thought to myself, well, let me just dive in and get started. And if it doesn't work, I can always go back.
Hi, this is Shea Murtaugh of Hoffmann, the founder and president, and you've just tuned into the HMDL podcast, where we discussed all tools and tips and firsthand experience to grow yourself professionally and personally. I'm very excited today to have Allison Howard on, and she is the founder and CEO of Nollapelli. Hi, Allison. Welcome to the HMDL podcast.
Hi, Shea. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so I just want to say a little bit about you and your background. Your background is in chemical engineering, and you have a passion for healthy skin. And Allison Howard is boldly combining the latest in beauty science, textile technology, and sleep discovery to help you sleep well and wake up looking and feeling ready to face your day. And I've talked to you many times about your product, and it also helps with your face, right? With wrinkles, and we all hate to get these little sleep wrinkles as we age, correct?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So do you want to say anything more about your company before we get started?
So, as you mentioned, we are really forging into the future of sleep and beauty and wellness, and pulling textile technology into that equation, because really there's so much that we can do with the fabrics that we interact with throughout our day, and especially that 1/3 of our day that we spend asleep, that can just help us to sleep better, to look better, and to feel better.
Great. Well, so why don't you talk a little bit about how you got started? Because I think you have a very unique story, especially because, everybody wonders, should I start a company? When should I start a company? So talk a little bit about how you got where you are now.
Sure, absolutely. So as you mentioned, my background is in chemical engineering. I had always really liked chemistry and math, but admittedly wasn't sure what to major in college until someone told me, if you get a degree in chemical engineering, you could do whatever you wanted to do. And I said, well, okay, that's perfect for me, because I have so many interests and I don't know what I want to do. So let me just get that as a foundation and go from there. And that really led into 20 great years at 2 large multinational material science companies in almost every role that exists in those companies. So really got to see a lot about polymers and specialty materials, how they're made, and everything from how they're made to how they're sold, and the customers and the markets. But it was sort of towards the end of those 20 years when a couple things happened at the same time. First of all, I started recognizing that I was getting older and paying more attention to my skin, especially in the morning when I would wake up and look in the mirror and see some extra lines on my face. But at the same time, also, started to just see a lot of energy around entrepreneurship and starting companies. Really, that was not something that anyone talked about when I went to college. There wasn't a degree in entrepreneurship.
Me either. Never even thought that was an option.
No, right? I mean,
little known fact, we both were at the same school at one point, right?
You did I know. I'm sure we crossed paths.
Yeah.
But right, the goal when we graduated, Shea, was to get a job at an established company and maybe even retire from that same company. That's what my dad had done. And so that was the model. And that model really served me very well until, like I said, sort of 2 decades in, and I just started to, get a little itchy, and just, again, a kind of a compilation of things between, recognizing these lines on my face and starting to think about this connection between my body and my bedding, thinking about that like an engineer, and how do these two, pieces of the equation interact over the course of a night. And also then seeing this entrepreneurial energy building, especially here in Pittsburgh, really made me start to lean in that direction. But I'll be honest, it took several years before I actually took the dive. That required.
Let's dig into that a little deeper, because that's usually what separates most people from entrepreneurship. So what were the fears you had? What held you back?
I mean, first and foremost, money, right?
Yep,
Security,
that's the
not
biggest
getting a
one.
paycheck every week.
Mhm.
I worked for companies that also had amazing benefits in place and 401k, right? So, recognizing that I would be walking away from all of that as a safety net. Um, and frankly, moving into just a huge unknown. I had never started a company before. I personally didn't know many people who had started companies. That wasn't part of my family background, for instance. And so it was just, a lot of those unknowns that really held me back. But I'll say what helped me kind of get closer to the edge and then ultimately step over the edge was starting to socialize in that space, first of all, and meet other people who were doing it and realize that, they were also, scared, but that they didn't let that fear hold them back. That and then reflecting a lot myself. So a lot of personal soul searching and realizing that if I didn't try this, that someday I might have a regret.
Yeah.
And so ultimately that fear of regret or that potential fear of regret outweighed the fear of not having a paycheck every 2 weeks. And I thought to myself, well, let me just dive in and get started. And if it doesn't work, I can always go back or I can always, get into something else.
Yeah. And that's what I always say. Like, sometimes it's like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to you? You fail, right? Well, people fail all the time. They pick themselves back up and they move on, they try something new. And yeah, knowing that you could just go back to where you came from. And I thought the same thing when I started mine. I was like, what if I fail? Okay, I'll just go back. I sold media. So I was like, I'll just go back to selling media. I could get a job.
Right.
I'm sure I can get another job back there. So tell me a little bit about your company. So is what, a little over 2 years old? Is that correct?
Right.
So it's
Well,
a COVID. Is it a COVID baby? Is it a COVID baby company?
No, we're a little bit older than that. We actually launched in 2019,
Okay.
but with a very clear focus on a B2B business model. And that did radically change through COVID.
Yeah. I mean, think about it, she wanted to work with hotels and different companies. What's the first thing that was hit the most with COVID? It was travel, right? And hotels. So that's an interesting, how did that not discourage you from giving up? How did you feel at that moment? And what did you do to push through to not give up? Because that COVID was it put restaurants out of business. It just put so many companies out of business. I'm curious how you worked through that.
Right. So I like to say, let's all think back to, those early days of COVID. It was so unprecedented, but we also had no idea how long it was going to last, right? Like, at first everyone was like, oh, 2-3 weeks, by Easter.
I was on that bandwagon. I was like, this is crazy. They're not going to shut our country down for years.
Right. Exactly.
I missed that one completely. Okay.
Yeah. And so, the first few months we're holding on, like, okay. And working with all the partners that we had to come up with creative ways to, have them still be relevant to their audience, right? We can do home classes, we can do giveaways, we can package things that they can pick up, curbside, right, from our spa retail partners. So lots of energy in the early days in that direction. And then we also, leaned into face masks. We thought, oh, we have a fabric. It's really good for your skin. Let's make face masks out of them. So we did that.
A lot of people did that. They pivoted, like maybe they were making the antibacterial creams, like they had
right, all the hand sanitizer,
way to make that, right, instead of alcohol or something, at the time.
Right, exactly. But by mid-year, when it was clear that okay, this was gonna be around for a while, then that was the decision point, right? Like, what do we do? Do we shut down, or do we just shift focus? All the while, through hotels, the ultimate end customer is the person who's sleeping on the sheets, right? Who's having that experience. Why don't we just lean into that and see how that goes? And there was simultaneously a real interest in making your home so cozy, right? And investing in your home. And so, those forces really came together. Of course, we were not well prepared for that, and so bottom of a steep learning curve, but we rallied and brought some new folks onto the team that had more experience in direct to consumer marketing, and yeah, that really helped us to pull through.
So what's your typical day like? You are the founder, CEO. What is your typical day like, typical week, maybe even?
Yeah, so before COVID, I was going into an office every day. That changed through COVID. And now that I'm so set up at home, and a good bit of my day is spent on Zoom, I feel like it, doesn't necessarily make sense to go back to an office. So I'm perfectly comfortable being at home, where, my bedroom is just 20 yards away from my office, which presents some challenges at times. But I've got two children, so, a lot of the morning has to do with whatever they're doing and kind of getting them off for the day. Summer is kind of a mixed blessing in that we don't have to get up as early, but then they're around all day and a little bit more distracting. So school starts next week, which is great. But yeah, getting them out. And I'm really finding that mornings are my good, quiet thinking time. So trying to keep my mornings as free from meetings as I can so that I can just focus and get some things done. And then, having meetings later in the afternoon when my own energy starts to dip a little bit, that's an easier time for me to just sort of be talking with people and not have to be focused and thinking so much.
Yeah. So I'm curious to maybe understand that, what if your previous work experience actually led you? Was there one experience that actually led you into this true passion of sheets, outside of like waking up and sleeping and everything? But was there anything like at a previous job that made you really think I'm going to start my own company? Or
not specifically on textiles, because as much as I was involved with high tech materials, it really wasn't ever in the fabric realm. But it was just a building desire to get to see the whole company, right? So in a large company, I was fortunate to work in lots of different roles, but you still only see your little silo, right? Your little cog in the big wheel that, moves things forward. And as I matured in my career, I really wanted to be able to see how the whole thing fit together. And so I think that just sort of maturing in that way in a business sense really stirred up that interest in wanting to start my own business so that I would have full visibility and control, which again is a blessing and a curse, but just be able to see that entire process of beginning to end.
So you're getting ready to build a team, and I know you have some team members already, but what is the most important quality you look for in maybe your next director or your next high-level supervisor person to come on to help you get you to move further down in your goals?
So I think table stakes are always that they have some core competency in the area that you're looking for, but I think that's really just table stakes. I think what I'm looking for is someone who is very curious and willing to learn, right? We're a startup. There's a lot that we don't know. Even if, you're a marketer, this is still, uncharted territory. So you really need to be the kind of person who likes to roll up their sleeves and learn and be curious and creative and try new things. But then I'm also looking for someone who, has that, wide-eyed view, but can also really focus, right? Because at the end of the day, it is about execution, right? It's about setting goals and meeting goals in a timely fashion. And so it's that balance between, being curious and creative and wanting to get into new things, but then also being able to sort of drill it down into some focus and execution.
Yeah, that's great. Now you said the big picture. So where do you see your business in 5 years? Can you see all the way out there?
It's so fun to think about. I think there's really two primary ways that Nollapelli will look different 5 years from now. First of all, we will have a much bigger product portfolio today our product portfolio is sheets and pillowcases. And obviously, like I said, we did face masks. We are getting ready to introduce a brand new product for us, which is a sleep mask.
Yep.
That is not just any old sleep mask that blocks light, even though blocking light is very beneficial for restorative sleep. This one will have a beauty benefit as well. So the fabric on the inside will work with that skin around your eyes while you sleep. So, so first and foremost, we'll have a much bigger product portfolio across sleep, beauty, and wellness. And second of all, we'll be international. And we're already starting to get pulled in that direction now through our B2B partners, which is really exciting. But I think things like bedding and beauty and sleep and wellness are pretty universally desired. And so we're really excited to lean into that in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah. And that leads me to a question of talk about being made in the USA. What does that mean for you? What does that mean for our country? Talk about that, because so many companies have been exporting and with, not to get into politics, but we were working, I think a couple of years ago, we were working harder at creating more of a country making things. And so tell me all about Made in the USA for you and what that means.
Yeah, when I started on this journey, that was my goal, to be fully made in the USA, because I believe we have the skills and the know-how and the knowledge to be able to do that. What we didn't actually have is all of the equipment that's needed to weave wide width fabric for sheeting. That has left and has yet to come back. And so that was a limitation that I came up against, and then really had no choice but to look overseas to have the fabric woven. But I still said, okay, well, if that's the part that we have to do overseas, fine. But then we're going to bring the fabric in, and we're still going to cut and sew it in the US. And so that's just like so many other companies that may import a raw material. For us, fabric is our raw material. Mm-hmm. And so we do all of that, final manufacturing here in the US. And so we are still made in the USA, which I'm very proud of. And we'll strive to keep that as a hallmark of Nollapelli as we grow.
I think that's great. Just having pride in our country and just trying to build jobs in our countries too. You're probably, 100%. Employing so many people that, right. Indirectly with just making this. So I noticed that you are do a lot of volunteering, which I think is very important, especially as an owner of a company. And you got involved with the Sender Pittsburgh and the Children's Home of Pittsburgh and the Lemieux Family Center. So talk to me about, volunteering or, giving back, because I believe that's a big part of any kind of person's life,
Oh, I completely agree with you. I mean, I've been given so much. And so it's my, obligation that I'm grateful for, to be able to give back to others and share the talents that I have with organizations that can really benefit from it. Those two in particular, the Children's Home of Pittsburgh and Ascender, are both very near and dear to my heart. I've got personal connections to both of them. The Children's Home, maybe is not as well known as it should be, even though it's been around for over 100 years, has amazing programs for children and families, and some programs that my family tapped into at one time. And so, they were tremendously helpful for us. And so now I want to, I'm grateful to be able to give back to them. And then Ascender is a startup incubator in Pittsburgh, and also a co-working space that, really was part of my very early days in building a company. I went through their incubator program and just built, some amazing knowledge and an amazing network of people that remain close friends and mentors to this day, and are really helping me to build Nollapelli.
So, what does beauty sleep mean to you? I love beauty sleep, right? I mean, I get a lot of hours. Let's just, I mean, this, this looking younger thing doesn't come naturally. It is sleeping at least 8 hours a day.
Right.
Tell me about.
And it's not always easy, right? It's not always easy. Our
bodies, so important. I mean, there's books, there's a lot of books about getting enough sleep. So tell me about what beauty sleep means to you.
Yeah. So, our bodies are really complicated and they change over the course of our lives, right? And so sleeping at one point in your life might be different at a different point in your life. And I'm really, realizing that personally, the older I get. But so, beauty sleep, just very simply, is when you wake up in the morning and you feel fully rested and restored, right?
Oh, is
And
that how it's supposed to work? Oh, I didn't realize that.
well, that's what I would say, right? Because that's when you look your best, right? If you don't get a great night's sleep, it chances are it's going to show up on your face in the morning, regardless of what cream you put on or what eye mask you wore. If you aren't getting that restorative sleep, it's going to show up. But again, our bodies are really complicated, and there's so many factors that go into getting that great night's sleep. The way that I think about it now is I want to control for as many of those factors as I can and recognize that some of them are just out of my control, right? Sometimes, for me in particular, something will just get in my brain, and I know that my brain is just working on that when I sleep. And because, just because we're asleep, the other parts of our body are not, and they're working really hard. But, that's something that I can't necessarily control for. But I know in the morning if my brain hasn't, gone to sleep really and rested. And so beauty sleep, again, is just those mornings when you wake up and say, wow, okay, I had a great night's sleep. And so just lining up as many factors as you can to increase the likelihood of that happening is the goal for me.
Any book you would recommend that you think is every business owner should read?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll be honest, I don't read books as much as I would like to anymore, but there is one that I think not only business owners, I think frankly, everyone should read. It's called Chase the Lion by Mark Batterson.
I haven't heard that one.
All about, because it's more of a life book, but to me, life and business are very intertwined. For sure. It's about dreaming big dreams and not being, not just going through life playing it safe. And maybe I gravitate towards that book because it justifies my decision, right? It reinforces my decision, but it just really, rung true to me. I read it in the early days of this new venture. And it just firmly believes that we weren't put on this planet to just sort of coast by, that we're all here for a purpose and a reason, and we need to boldly move in that direction.
Yeah, and I hope our listeners out there, they all do find their purpose, because when you do find it, life is just so much more enjoyable.
Yeah.
And then I love it. Chasing the Lion. Is that what it's called?
Chase the Lion. Yeah.
I mean, who would chase a lion? Just a crazy person, right?
Right, exactly. But it's just this idea of like,
not having fear and just moving forward and
right.
I always say about not having a safety net. I meet a lot of people that want to start their own businesses, and they ask me the question all the time, like, did you do it while you had your job? I was like, no, you just literally have to just jump out of a plane. There's no parachute. You can't expect to have a parachute. You won't pull off a company unless you just do it. Right.
I completely agree. I also toyed with, do I do this on the side, or do I try to get another, part-time job while I do this? And I just realized, no, if I'm serious about this, I need to even show the universe that I'm serious about this, and I'm going to jump in with both feet.
Yeah, when I started mine, I was working 12 hours a day at the beginning because I was doing everything that the company did myself, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that, and then as I continued to start hiring people, eventually I got, to a normal working schedule, which has been great. I see that your company has been featured in many publications, including Forbes, Condé Nast, Traveler, BuzzFeed, and a lot more. How did you get in there? I mean, I think a lot of it has to be that you have to have a unique product. You have to have a unique reasons. I probably wouldn't be able to get in there. My company's just one of a trillion, right? But tell us how you got in there. What was your marketing strategy to get it into those publications?
Yeah, that's another great question. I mean, I'll just sort of come right out and say that there's a healthy dose of luck involved in all of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of it we have tried to orchestrate and some of it has just happened. In fact, just last week, one of those things that kind of came up organically came up and is very fruitful, right? It results in a nice influx of new orders. And it was something that we didn't, we weren't reaching out to try and get coverage in. It just happened. And so just to sort of be straightforward, I'll say there's a healthy dose of luck in it, but there's also a lot of, planning and preparation too. We had a PR partner for a while and she did help us get amazing coverage in Forbes and BuzzFeed and some of those other publications that you mentioned. And then there's that part that you said about just having a good story, having a good product, a unique product. I mean, editors are always looking for content. They're always looking for what's new and what's different and what's exciting. And so, that I think that's the table stakes in that equation. But then, can you get in front of that person or can they find you? That's where it's a little bit of luck.
Well, yeah, and luck is when opportunity meets preparedness.
Yes, I love that quote. That is a good one.
Me too. Speaking on that, what quote? We're going to finish up with a quote that you live by or that you love or that you created yourself. Any quote?
Yeah, that is such a good one. And I absolutely love quotes. I probably couldn't pick one. And I, couldn't even think of just one off the top of my head, but I'll throw out a couple, and it's kind of connected to what we were talking before. I heard someone say once, it's not about losing fear, right? So it's not about not being afraid. It's losing the fear of being afraid, right? So don't be afraid of being afraid. Know that you're going to be afraid, right?
Yeah.
Know that it's going to be scary, right? I think that's just so I'm not saying it very eloquently, but I think that's a really good reminder and a way that I want to live my life to, just sort of move in the direction of the lion and know that it's going to be scary, but be okay with that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do, anxiety comes into play.
Sure.
I've seen people in my life that just will be paralyzed by just the whole anxiety of it, right? And so I think, if you're always working on yourself and you're always trying to better your health, one thing could be as simply as just working on how to deal with your anxiety around fear.
Right. Right. And
helpful.
I mean, I think there's just a sort of a continual nature to that we may all have moments in our lives where things become really challenging for a season. Or I'll go back to sort of those nights because I just had one last night where, I woke up in the middle of the night and my brain was just busy. Right. So I think it, a degree of that is very normal. I think it's right. Just recognizing when it's time to get help.
Yeah. And one of the things that, as we finish up that I could offer on my end too, is really, I always say, get back on the horse the next day, because 5 times out of the week I'm met with maybe some kind of rejection. I'm, maybe out of nowhere, we're being let go as the agency, a record for a client, or you tried so hard in a pitch process and you didn't make it to the final round. I mean, it's all those things. And I think if I could offer any advice is just get really comfortable with change.
Yes.
And know how to pick yourself back up. Right.
Right. I think it's great that you in particular share that, Shea, because, people will look at you. I look at you and say, wow, she's so successful and look what she's built. But those sorts of things still happen to you too.
Oh, it's blood, sweat, and tears. It's been 18 years. We just celebrated our 18th anniversary. Yeah. A couple weeks ago. And I always try to stay humble in the fact that, a lot of people helped me get here. My employees are such a huge part of our growth and success right now. And I've been working towards more being on the business and not in the business. And And that's where every, I think, business owner wants to get. Well, thank you so much, Allison, for being on our show today. And we really would love our listeners to find out more how to get your product. And I think it'd be great if we could throw in a little bit of a discount there. So what do you think?
Absolutely, Shea. Thank you again so much for having me. So anyone can find us online at nollapelli.com. So NOLLAPELLI.com. And also on all the social channels at Nollapelli. And we would love to extend a discount to your audience. So you can go to our website, again, nollapelli.com. And if you use code HMDL and the number 30, we would be thrilled to give you 30% off any purchase on our website.
Well, thank you, Allison, so much for joining us today. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the HMDL podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to follow us on all our social channels at Hoffmann Murtaugh. I am Shea Murtaugh, and I will catch you on the next episode.